I was talking to someone about Gemini intelligence, like how smart is it, and when I use it for coding, and I was pointing out to him that when I'm doing co-coding with Gemini, I'm not really doing it as it's a artificial general intelligence and it's going to solve my problems, but more like a rubber ducky co-coder or a outsourced um, new new coder, new on the project coder. In both cases, um, you're going to do best by writing out your problem statement because then you understand it better. That's how you do it with a rubber ducky. That's completely required. Actually, it's not how you do it. Usually with a rubber ducky, you just describe it to another or pretend you're describing it to another person. But if you write it out, you have an artifact that you can store. And with the co-coder, with the outsourced person, with the Slack channel that you work with outsourced developers, you do the same thing. So my point is that instead of vibe coding, you're really using all the tools that apply constraints onto code that have been developed over decades, since the 90s, on how to specify problems, how to communicate them as briefly and quickly to others, and as let's say dispassionate. Whereas vibe coding, you have to have this vibe feeling. You're pretending you're kind of having this vibe feeling. Maybe what people really mean is it's fast back and forth when they're imagining vibe coding, but really it's rapid communication streams. And I think it's better to say that, because then you can refine your communications. You could say what types of communications are productive and what types of communications are destructive. So, like, I kind of talk to this Gemini, as I would talk to another person, using politeness and things like that. Not because I'm concerned with their feelings, but because I want them to focus on the issue. I want them to have the background of the issue, and I want them to focus on the producing a result. So I want their mind, and I want this conversation and the content of the conversation to be focused on producing the proper result for this case at hand. And I think that's really the focus of productivity, of technology, of many things, of moving in the right direction. So it has a much broader application. But in this case, so it does a pretty good job. I just compressed the conversation, but I have been able to refer back to previous topics that we discussed, and it's on the topic of collecting metrics for user activity on a website. And this is a website that I didn't build, but I maintain, and metrics is a topic that I haven't done any work on the website. So I have to bounce back and forth, give the Gemini some indication of level of context, like, does it expect me to know everything? No, and stuff like that. and you want to communicate that in as few words, I mean, as tersely as possible, where they're going to pick up on um, your your investigation into the code. And because that's really a big part of coding, is investigating existing code bases. That's a huge part for any new coders and people thinking AI is going to take your job. Way FUD, way FUD. That's like just a propaganda. I mean, promotional. What's it? What are the people called who just focus on promotion? Or there's two terms, propaganda, promotion, that kind of conflict. But the people who don't do, they're out there, YouTube content creators, and they get a lot of clicks, we could say, for selling hype. There's a hype cycle and then a FUD cycle, and they do both. They're playing both sides of the thing, and it's destructive. It's not the kind of conversation we should be having, So it doesn't observe the guidelines of like politeness and focusing on the technical solution. But in this case at hand, we can estimate like the level of intelligence that Gemini does a pretty good job if you think of it as a rubber ducky that's going to help you interrogate the code, or a higher on developer on this continent or another in a different time zone, whatever, who's not familiar with your code base. Let's just say like your average, new hire green programmer that you're bringing on, and trying to on-ramp them to this code base that they are unfamiliar with, because that's sort of how all coders are continuously in the that's sort of the continuous position of all coders. We're all going into a new code base. For instance, I am new in the metrics on this code base that I've used extensively. So for a couple of years, I've been maintaining this code that I didn't write. I haven't done anything in the metrics area. So I am new to the metrics area, and the Gemini is new to the metrics area. And anytime you're working with other coders, you kind of want to telegraph your level of expertise on the particular code that you're investigating at the time, so that they have some level of understanding. Are you the person who generated this code, greenfield, or not? And because then they're going to know whether to ask you or to investigate the code and things like that. So that's what I've done here. I kind of indicated that a little bit, and it has the background, but it does a pretty good job of understanding that level of knowledge. And then it goes through and it does a very good job of, while I'm looking at the code, I'm over in another terminal scraping, grepping the code and the database and seeing how they match. It is also over here searching the SQL in the code base. It hasn't done any database queries yet, but it has investigated the migration strategy of the SQL, and it's looking at how that is populating or not getting populated. And it actually searched through all the code, and then it produced a database populator that this could be used to populate 141 rows. Oh, I can't scroll down because of where I placed this window, but there are 141 um, code uh, metrics, not code but usage metrics that it created, which is very handy. It would have taken me a while to collect all of these, and actually, what I probably would have done is just because I think I indicated to the Gemini that I found 91 or 92 distinct metric IDs being used already in the database, and then I skipped out to talk to Gemini about it, and it found in the code, it found 141 metric descriptions being used in the Java. And so I'll probably accept those. What I probably would have done is truncated the metrics type table at 90. I might have done it at 91, the ones that I found being used. But what would I have been smarter to do is to increment that by tens until I found the erroneous usages populated in the metrics table. But on top of that, Gemini has also found some indication of how the erroneous data is getting pushed into the metrics type table. And I think it's also going to tell me a little more about how I can view the metrics, either by, I can see the queries, I've grepped it a bit, I can run the queries and get the metrics already, but it's smart enough to look through the code. It's going to find some stuff that I didn't find. So my point is for people thinking that coding is dead, the coding profession is dead. It's total FUD. We've heard that dozens of times. Well, at least 3 big times in the history of coding in America, which now isn't the center of the world of coding like it once was, but it is still big in coding. We just keep pushing it out. You know, we had Silicon Valley and Redmond and some other hotspots of coding in the U.S., and we've just sort of viciously pushed them away, pushed them out, told American coders, you'll never make it as a coder in this country, it's going overseas. You know, high band. So one of the big pushes, one of the big FUDs telling people you'll never make it as a coder is telling people it's all going overseas because that's where low-cost coding will be produced because of high bandwidth internet. That was going to push all coding to India and Russia and China. And it was just over for American coders. And that happened somewhere in the late 90s, early 2000s, where, you know, a huge propaganda push. All the media was saying it's over. All the coding jobs will be low-paying jobs in the U.S. There's no reason to learn coding. Because it's all going overseas to really low-paid workers. And a bunch of that happened. And a bunch of companies paid the price. They moved it to India. They started building centers over there that were going to be the new centers. And then they brought it back here. A company I worked for spent over a decade, 15 years or something, reshoring American coders because they went to India and they ran Indian shops over there. And then they ended up bringing it back over here because of the, let's call it impedance mismatch between, just waiting 12 hours or, a tempo for every a day. A tempo is a day, to turn around a request to India and come back here. So you really had to package up every request, and then they would get mistranslated, and you wouldn't find out for a day. So just that long range, plus there was a quality issue. So they would, front, here's our 5 best coders, and they would be good. But then there would be 100 hire-ons that were more like GPT-2, and they sounded like they were speaking the language, but they didn't understand anything. And we're still in that with LLMs, where they have a question of are they really reasoning or not? And that's going to go on. So this was supposed to be a very short video. I'm going to cut it at this point because I've overtalked. But there is a lot to this story. And if I scroll back up to where I started this problem, it understands the context. The reason I like Gemini is because of the large context window. And that kind of got me hooked on it. The other ones would cut off the context too early. You really want a model that can understand things from the beginning of the conversation and things like that. And, like I've said things to it like, let's observe a do no harm policy here where we're not, don't change anything that is not a solution providing to the current topic at hand. Don't go removing comments and things like that. Although it still has difficulty with that because it just doesn't keep the comments in the context of what it's doing, but different editor LLM editors are in development. That is to say, the way that they specify their code changes are a work in progress currently. They either overwrite the whole file and forget comments, or they use said and awk and other greps poorly. And but that's, so there's a lot more to talk about this. Gemini does a good job. It's, if you treat it as a rubber ducky or a new on the job, semi-competent developer who you don't expect to know your code base as well as you do or better than you do, you still have to learn how to code because you have to learn how to think. And the real lesson of debugging isn't debugging the code in the computer, it's debugging the bugs in your own thinking. End of transmission.